Okay, here are the updates that we currently know as much as I know. And if others of you know more than I do about this, please let me know. So, if you've turned your TV on, as I said, in the last couple of months, you've heard that the government has been shut down. The 43-day government shutdown ended November 12th. It ended because the Senate and the House came together and approved a continuing resolution legislation. So on the 10th, the Senate passed it 60 to 40. On the 12th, the House voted 222 to 209 to approve it. And the president, late on the 13th, signed it into law. So the continuing resolution, to be noted, funds the federal government to January 30th, 2026. At that time, if Congress doesn't pass additional legislation to continue funding the federal government, the government can shut down again in February. As we have heard, at least at the state, uh, almost all of the Department of Education was riffed. So they were sent home. Only those programs at the level of director and secretary remained there. So if you had been communicating with the Department of Education or you had requests from us to send questions or ask for technical assistance or guidance from the Department of Education, there just wasn't anybody there. So, what this continuing resolution does is it does include funding most of the government, including the Department of Education, those federal workers, including those at the Department of Education who were riffed on October 1. It reverses that and brings those folks down, and it prohibits any additional rifts up until that January 30th deadline, at which time Congress needs to step up and pass another continuing resolution to continue to fund those agencies, those departments, including the Department of Education. I will say that we received notice that on the 14th of November, those folks at the Department of Education got access to their emails again and started responding to questions and concerns and requests. So that's what we know about the government shutdown. On the 18th, so 2 days ago, we received an announcement from the Department of Education, from Secretary McMahon, that the Department of Education has entered into 6 new interagency agreements with 4 separate agencies back in DC. Those 4 agencies that this interagency agreement is going to be working with is the Department of Labor, Department of Interior, Health and Human Services, and the Department of State, or Foreign Policy and International Relationships. So I put a link here below that we will share with you what those agreements are. And here's the intentions. So that first link to that tab is what the intention is of doing this. This signed agreement with the Department of Labor. That second link on the word has takes you to a more detailed intention. That intention is to create an integrated federal education and workforce system. Department of Labor makes sense. To reduce the need for states to consult multiple federal agencies to manage their programs. So for Title I specifically, there isn't a lot of work done with the Department of Labor. We'll see what that looks like when some of those staff. When you click on those links, you'll see that what it means is for most titled programs, most of them, not all of them, the requirements under statute will still be consistent with those folks at the Department of Education. So what they had done for us before, they will still be our contacts, and their responsibilities will be to provide that technical assistance and guidance, monitoring, and more importantly, the allocation of funds each year. So here's a little more what those look like. So here's specifically the interagency agreements that the Department of Education
Hey Max, if you can hear me, you're frozen, so you might want to turn off your camera. And while Max is trying to unthaw or to thaw, um, I am going to just make sure that we go over the slides. And Becky, if I don't know if you can pull up those slides since I can't share my, or maybe I can share my screen, but if Becky, you can share your slides. Um, so basically what Max was going to say is kind of currently the thought of the administration to dole out different responsibilities of the Department of Education to other departments. And so that's what that slide was showing. And Becky's going to pull up the slides in just a second so we can go on to the next one. I just got a text from Max. Oh, his computer's updating. So unfortunate timing. So I'm going to take point of privilege and just remind everybody that the DMI is due next week. I'm saying it's due next week just because I don't want anybody working on the DMI over their Thanksgiving break. So if there are some of you, oh, Max, are you back on? There are some of you that have submitted one item or one part of the DMI, but still need to need to submit the other part of the DMI. So the best thing to do is to go in and just make sure both instruments say they're submitted or approved. Becky, is that something that you're pulling up? Are you going to pull up the slides? Okay, I've got the slides. So can you see those, Tracy?
Hey, can you hear me, Val?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay, so except everything's great. My computer decided to restart at the most appropriate time feasible. So
That's
thanks,
okay.
Becky.
I just gave a commercial on the DMI.
Oh, good.
Do you want me to keep sharing or do you want to share your
If you
screen?
wouldn't mind, that'd be great.
Okay.
I was almost done, folks. Perfect. So where I was, these are the interagency agreements that the department has with other agencies, other departments back in DC. So our Department of Education has the interagency agreement with the Department of Labor. If you click on that link that says here, it will take you to a website that shows you a little more detail of what the intentions are of that. Post-secondary education also has that agreement with the Department of Labor. American Indian Education is with the Department of Interior. Foreign Medical Accreditation Partnership, I don't know what that even is, but they're going to be with Health and Human Services, which makes sense. Childcare will also be with Health and Human Services. And then the International Education and Foreign Language Studies Partnership is with the state. So that's with Foreign Affairs. So most of our stuff that we deal with, except for our beloved colleague, Dr. Chuck Foster, will be working with the Department of Labor. Now, if you go to those fact sheets, it will tell you that responsibilities, and I think even in some cases, it will be physical moves where members of the Department of Education will be moving to the Department of Labor so they can coordinate efforts with the folks at the Department of Labor. So, what does that mean for Title I? What does that mean for other federal programs? to be determined. This notification or this announcement just came out 2 days ago. So I'm sure there will be a lot of pending webinars to explain what that means. We should be getting communication from the Department of Education to clarify what that relationship with us means, how it's going to impact funding timelines or requirements under the law for the Department of Education to be determined. It shouldn't, and I'll move on to explain that in just a little bit, because we received our October grant award notification with full funding for Title I and other federal programs. So those funds should be locked in for at least the 27 months that they're allocated for. So in that context, and if you go to the next slide, the Every Student Succeeds Act is still in current enforcement, meaning Title I and various other titles in there still have the requirements under the law. So Title I, what that law specifically is titled, is Improving the Academic Achievement of the Disadvantaged. We know that the focus of disadvantaged under that title of the law is for those students, areas, schools, communities that are experiencing economic disadvantaged or experiencing economic disadvantage. So what Congress has done is level funded to enact that Title I purpose and its title, $18 billion nationally. They turned that over for allocation to states to the Department of Education. And the next slide. So ED's regulatory guidance and through the mechanisms of the funding formula through 4 statutory formulas for 25-26 school year, Utah was awarded $100 million. The regulatory goals that are set up by the Department of Education, achievement and growth, closing achievement gaps, teacher capacity, engaging parents and families, and providing a well-rounded education. Under that title and under the purpose of Title I, well-rounded means that's where the equitable services come in, that these students can experience and have as many chances to achieve academically and grow academically as their peers. And the next slide. Thank you. So having said that, we've experienced in Utah, because of the way Title I is, the funds are calculated and allocated, we've experienced some volatility in the funding. If you'll recall back from FY22 to FY23, Utah experienced, this was just right after the pandemic or currently in the pandemic, a $13 million decrease in funds. A lot of reasons for that. Some of the volatility we learned through our communications with the Census Bureau, where the data is used to calculate funds for Title I, that Utah made it through the pandemic a lot better than other states. Also to boot, Utah is pretty infamous at the Census Bureau for not completing Census Bureau surveys. So there's a lot of gray area, and they have to do a lot of pontifications and estimations based on what would be in comparison with other states. Then we have 25-26. We received $20 million increase in funds. We don't expect, and we can't expect based on previous years and the volatility of the funds, that will remain at that level of funding. So having said that, we always encourage a certain process. You've seen this slide before. Next slide, please. This particular graphic that I share a lot of times. This is the continuous school improvement model that we've used through school improvement, and it's kind of gained traction throughout the agency, meaning regardless of what resources are available, it's our responsibility to make sure that the experience for our students, the growth and achievement of our students, is in a continuous cycle of improvement. setting the direction. Where are we? What is our mission? What is our vision? Then conducting needs assessments. Okay, where are our students? Where are they achieving? Where are they growing? Where are they not? Identifying specifically where those things are and specifically why. And then we create that plan based on those things. And this is where, once you have your plan, where you know this is what needs to be done to make the experience and have our students grow and achieve academically, this is where our resources come in. Right here, we've created the plan. How are we going to get the resources to fund that plan? You click on it one more time. Title I, this is where it comes in, where we know that a lot of times the funding with Title I can be volatile. Talk to those districts whose Title I from one year to the next was cut in half. Also talk to those folks, and maybe it's you that experienced this, where the Title I allocation for your LEA was a substantial increase. It causes as many situations as a decrease in funding. But if you follow that particular continuous improvement cycle, then you're in line to be prepared to address the needs of your students. Creating a plan before once you've got the plan in place, this is what needs to be done regardless of what resources are available. Now here, what resources do we have, inclusive of Title I? Then implementing the plan, monitoring its progress, adjusting where needed, and then we start over again. One more time. Title I supplemental. It comes on top of everything that you would do regardless. This is where our students are. This is what we need. This is what we're going to do. We're going to implement our plan with the resources we have to do that. I know you've seen this before, but we encourage this where there's a lot of inconsistencies right now with the Department of Education, a lot of talk around federal funding, what it means, what's going to happen, a lot of talk. This is where we follow this cycle so that we're prepared to address those student needs at all times. Questions? Going once, going twice, sold. Thank you. If questions do come to you, we will be available afterwards in the office hours and we can talk about them. At this time, let me turn the time over to our friend Tracy Gooley. If you recall, she was here last year talking about this particular topic. There is a potential impact on Title I. As I just explained, there can be a lot of inconsistencies. This may potentially be one of those things that impacts our program. Tracy, thank you. I'll turn the time over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I don't know if it's Max or Becky, but I'll just let you guys keep sharing. Thank you for having me this morning. I'm Tracy Gooley. I am one of our special education assessment specialists here at USBE. And I am the one that oversees all of our alternate assessments for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. And then with that comes the responsibilities of helping oversee this, what we call 1% alternate assessment participation threshold or CAP. Go ahead, next slide. So where this all comes from is when ESSA was reauthorized, there is in those federal regulations, there is a space where it used to state that a state could only have 1% of their student population be proficient in our academic assessments. When this was reauthorized, they changed this to be that a state is only allowed to have 1% of our student population participate in our statewide assessments. And so the assessments that they're looking at here are what we consider our accountability assessments. And so those would be the RISE, Utah Aspire Plus, and then DLM is the alternate assessment for those students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. Go ahead, next slide. So when this was reauthorized, and they changed this, what we call 1% threshold or CAP, came a whole string of other things that we have to do. So we have been engaging in this process in Utah since this was reauthorized. We have yet to go over that 1% threshold or 1% cap. However, this is the year that we, off of last school year's assessments, this will be the year that we are identified as being over that 1%. So within this regulation, what we cannot do is prohibit an LEA from assessing more than 1% of their students on an alternate assessment. Because at the end of the day, these are some IEP team decisions, and your student populations in your LEAs are going to look different across the board. So this cap really sits at the state level. However, within that, though, becomes other things that we are required to have LEAs do who may have assessed over 1% of your student population on alternate assessments. And so with that, LEAs are required to submit justification back to USBE as to why they assessed more than 1% of their students on the alternate assessment. And then we at the state are also obligated to provide appropriate oversight to those LEAs. So go ahead, Max. And so here is an overlook of where we've been with our participation rates in our alternate assessment. And the way this is calculated is this is not calculated on the number of students that are enrolled in the state or enrolled in your LEA that are identified as being alternate assessment participants. This calculation is based on those actual students that take our tests, how many of them participated in the alternate assessment. So we do have parent opt-out as a state parental right. And so sometimes LEAs have found that that has been an impact for them, but that's how this calculation is done here. So right before this was reauthorized and in sort of that first year that ESSA was in place, we were as a state over 1%. And then since then, we've gone down and been underneath that 1%. And slowly since those COVID years, that 2021 school year, we have been increasing. So it was anticipated last year that we would hit over that 1%. So you can see here the number of LEAs since 21 that have been over 1% within that LEA. And you can see we've slowly been increasing those numbers as well. So this past school year, we had 53 LEAs that assessed more than 1% of their student population on the alternate assessment. Go ahead. So within this regulation sits the ability for a state to submit a waiver to waive that 1% cap. However, in order for a state to submit a waiver and it to be accepted, one of the contingencies in there is that a state has to have assessed at least or more of their 95% of all of their students enrolled in our statewide assessments and 95% of our students with disabilities participating in our assessments. And so you can see last school year where we landed with that. So we as a state are not we are not able to apply for a waiver and it would not be accepted because we do not meet that 95% participation in our statewide assessments. Okay, go ahead, Max. So as we've started encroaching on this 1% the last couple years, we, started doing some root cause analysis ourselves at the state. And one of the things we wanted to look at was that enrollment piece. Was parent opt out? Is that one of the components that is impacting that participation and maybe inflating that 1% identification. And as we dug into statewide enrollments, looking at those October 1, December 1, and year-end counts, we can see that As we move into year-end count in the last couple years, we are identifying more than 1% of our students in Utah just enrolled. So we know that that over 1% indicator is not just an assessment participation component. We do have IEP teams that are identifying over 1%. So go ahead, Max or Becky. So this is just another graph or another way to look at that data and looking at trends. And we looked at comparing our math DLM alternate assessment rates to those student counts in October, December year end. And you can see that green bar, which is the top one, are year end counts that come in. And we use what is called that 1% flag to identify our students who are alternate assessment participants. We are identifying more than 1%. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so this leads us into consequences. So what are the consequences when a state assesses more than 1% of their student population on an alternate assessment? So the first tier, if you will, would be if a state is at 1.0 to 1.3%, and we didn't submit a waiver but would have been eligible, we would be receiving a notification letter and just required to submit a plan, and they call it, to come into compliance with the requirement. However, we don't meet the criteria to be eligible for a waiver because we don't have 95% participation. So that should move us, next slide, into that next bucket, if you will. Oh, is there not? There we go. Thanks. Of what the consequence will be. So what is anticipated is that we submit last year's assessment data to the feds. Our deadline is in January. We usually get that submitted in December. So it is anticipated that this spring we will receive notification from the Department of Education. So the bucket we fit in here is, right, we would have not been eligible for a waiver, but we tested more than 1%. So it is anticipated that we will receive a letter that is stating that they are going to put a Title I Part A grant award condition, and we will have to submit a plan to the Department of Education as to how we are going to come into compliance with this 1% cap. So go ahead, next slide, Max. There are additional consequence buckets, and last year when I presented to you, those of you that were here last year, we outlined all of them. So for every year you continue to be over 1% and you don't make headway on reducing that or coming under 1%, they continue to kind of escalate that grant award condition. We have had states across the country that have been over 1% since the very beginning of this regulation. No states have yet to have Title I funding withheld due to this. They have, over all of the years that we've been navigating this with the Department of Education, as all states, they really don't want to withhold that funding. So they really do have an interest in working with states to come within that. But there are several things that other states have done to come under that 1% mark and things that we have already begun to implement. So what is anticipated or expected for us, to submit in a plan will be, what are we going to do to improve the implementation of our participation guidelines for alternate assessments? And it also states here that one thing a state should consider doing is revising its definition of children with the most significant cognitive disabilities so that a state assesses fewer than 1% of its students. So that is the work that we have been doing so far. Other things will be, what additional supports and oversight are we going to put in place for LEAs and how we're going to monitor that. So we have been monitoring this. We've had LEAs submitting justification letters. We've been pulling IEP files. We've been doing corrective action around this. And so we had to think about what would be those next steps. So if you move to the next slide. So some of what Utah has done, and you can just see there's additional information that was presented to special ed directors around where the charge for defining the most significant cognitive disability comes into and how we are required at the state level to create those guidelines. So next slide. Um, and again, it states in the regulations where it talks about how we should also at the state level be ensuring that students with a significant cognitive disability that don't meet our criteria as a student with the most significant, how they should be participating in their core academic instruction and regular assessments. Next slide. So that brings us to kind of what our next steps are and what we're rolling out with your SPED directors. So this was presented to them a couple weeks ago. So they are actively engaging in all of these new processes here. So what Utah has been doing all of these years is we have not been defining the most significant cognitive disability. We've been defining what it is for a student to have a significant cognitive disability, not the most. So that's the work that we've undergone is updating those guidelines and working to update what is that definition for the most significant cognitive disability. So go ahead, next slide. So what we have done, there have been two major updates that we have done to this definition. And in previous years, we've really tried to let teams take a holistic approach. We've tried not to give them specific numbers to lie on in what this is defining. However, now that we're in a space that we've had to define now the most significant of that group, you can see in bold here, here's what we've added to our definition, is that when we are talking about this population of students and when IEP teams are trying to determine who these kiddos are and if they qualify to participate in alternate assessments, we are talking about students whose special education eligibility has their intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior is typically functioning 2.5 or more standard deviations below the mean. So in all the previous years, we have not put numbers in place for teams to use as guidance around this. And that's where we are starting this year. The other thing we've added to help teams really untangle which kiddos we're talking about here is that IEP teams need to know that these are kiddos that part of their course of study and what's going on with services and instruction is that they do need to be addressing the significant impact in that adaptive behavior skills because it's a two-pronged component in determining the most significant cognitive disability. So the next couple slides, we're just going to kind of skip through, but I just wanted you to see what were the conversations that we dug into pretty heavily last week with your special education directors around where we came up with this 2.5 standard deviations. And so it was really walking through understanding a bell curve when we're looking at those cognitive and adaptive measures and how really 1% of a population on a bell curve in these evaluations sits at 3 standard deviations below, where most states have landed in updating guidance around all of this is a lot of states have landed in that 2.5 standard deviations below the mean to help identify this group of kids. So go ahead, next one. So again, this was just a way to really walk them through what is it that we're looking at when we're dealing with these eligibility evaluations, how we have standard metric scores, and standard deviations and standard error of measure that come into play. And really, the biggest encouragement pieces is that it needs to be school psychologists or their eligibility evaluators that they're really working heavily with right now, to help teams understand and determine and talk to parents about what this all means. So the next slide. So then we just gave them an example of a woodcock or a whisk, sorry, cognitive, which we see quite often. How do we make that calculation in the 2.5 standard deviations and where that standard error of measure comes in? So that sort of range in which we're looking at for that impact in students. Next slide. Again, what we're really trying to promote is the defensibility in this. So if at the end of the day, there ended up ever being a due process, or again, right, we have to provide justification back to the Department of Education as well. Are we ensuring that our IEP teams are making defensible decisions, that the data supports the criteria that we've outlined in these guidelines, that any stranger can pick it up and clearly see that there is that significant impact in the cognitive and adaptive, and that everything follows that reflection of the definition of students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. So this leads us to really where we're at in our process and timeline for this year now. So as of Tuesday afternoon, all of the notification letters to those 53 LEAs that assessed over 1% have gone out to your special education directors. So you can absolutely check in with them and find out if they are the ones that landed over this 1%. And this is, a typical sort of timeline in which we've had implemented for the last, 5, 6, 7 years that we've been doing this. So justification letters from those districts will be due back to USBE by January 5th. And then we will continue moving forward with monitoring. So those LEAs that are chosen for monitoring this year under this 1% cap will be notified by the end of January. Next slide. So here's where some additional changes have come into place. We have added a couple components to justification letters that your special ed directors need to look at and respond to us. So one of the things that we are asking them to do is to just provide us a tally of the number of students that have qualified for alternate assessments and the special education eligibility classification that they fall under. So that is something that we are looking at. We also are required under these federal regulations to be looking at disproportionality. Does the LEA or the state have a certain student group that is disproportionately identified for taking alternate assessments? And so that was included. We only had 4 LEAs out of our 53 that were identified as having any sort of disproportionate in a student group. So that was in their notification letter. Okay, so the other big change that's happened is now that we've updated these participation guidelines and we have changed that criteria, what needs to happen now is time. It is going to take time for special education directors and teachers and teams to be trained on the implementation of this. And then we also have a population or a pocket of students that may have previously qualified to take alternate assessments that may no longer qualify. So with that, what our expectations are is that what we're doing for monitoring this year is we are not going to look at individual files and individual eligibility. We are not going to issue findings of noncompliance as we've done in the past. What we will be issuing may be a warning of noncompliance. But what we're going to do is we will produce a pre-populated spreadsheet of all of the students that we have currently in our system as identified as taking alternate assessments. And then there's just some really high level information for every single one of those students in the 1% category for that LEA that they'll fill out and submit back to us. And really what we're looking at is we're digging into those intellectual or those cognitives and adaptives and those scores and really seeing where our students sit in alignment with these new guidelines. And then if we find that there are students that no longer fit within those guidelines, your LEA will be asked to submit an action plan to us and how they may look at transitioning those kiddos from our essential elements and alternate assessments back into the core. And really, because we're talking about kids here, and kids are not black and white, we are in a space where that timeline, we're giving a 2-year timeline to make that transition. So next slide. What the expectations are now for implementing these updated guidelines is that moving forward from here, any newly identified students to participate in the alternate assessment need to uphold to this new criteria. And then when we think about that transition time for students that are already currently identified that may no longer qualify, what we're asking your special ed directors to do is to dig in and really start with those students in that grades K-8. So our students right now that are already in high school, that have been on this path, if you will, and in the essential elements and alternate assessments their entire educational career, moving them may be more detrimental right now than helpful. Some of them may already be on tracks to earning alternate diplomas, and to pull that rug out from underneath them could not be good. So where we are really looking at that focus is those elementary kids. And those are the plans that we're asking your districts to put into place. Okay, next slide. So the other thing that we have offered up, as it is, we have set some of these new criteria at the state level, digging into data, working with, school psychologists in other states around what they've done, where we are in a space that we would like to support your special ed directors, and also get feedback is through this community of practice. So what we have offered to your special ed directors is to sign up. It's just a quick survey if they're interested in joining this. And we will look at putting together a space for LEAs to come together and problem solve around what does it look like to implement these new guidelines, what are resources, what are things that we as a state can also do out of the special education department to support some of this transition in new guidelines for your districts. So that's really where we are in kind of our response to these regulations. And really at the end of the day, like Leah Voorhees said, this is really about protecting those Title I funds and responding to the federal government, but also we want to do what is right by kids. And so we want to ensure that students that truly are not students with that most significant cognitive disability, that really do have that mild, moderate kind of component, that they have every opportunity to engage their education in our core standards. And so some of what we have seen across the years as we've been monitoring is we've seen students that should have never qualified as a student with a significant cognitive disability, let alone the most, where we've had eligibility assessments and data, everything in like low average or average range, and kicked it back to IEP teams, and IEP teams have come back and said, no, we think this is significant. And so within our previous guidelines, we really didn't have a lot of teeth to kind of hold teams to that. And so that is some of the direction in which we've taken, is to be able to be in that space, to support teachers to make better decisions for kids, and ensuring that we're giving kids the most opportunity to be successful. So go ahead, Max. I think that was the next. So here are some links for you to go if you want to read more about the federal regulations. There is a couple new memos that have come out this year stating things, and then of course the link to the special education assessment webpage. So if you click on that and you go under alternate assessment, you can scroll down and see the section that is 1%. I am in the process. I've got to finalize this next week, the public reporting. So we are required to publicly report the LEAs that are over 1%. And we just list a yes or no, they were or weren't. That is the last data piece that I have to get updated and posted. So hopefully by next week we can have that out. But if you're curious, if you are an LEA that has been over the 1%, please reach out to your special ed directors. That email came from me, and they received those on Monday and Tuesday. So they are all out. Go ahead, Max. Any questions? So any questions or concerns or thoughts? Oh, yeah. So Lisa, this is only for grades 3 through 10. And it doesn't include Acadience K2. So yeah, it is just those accountability assessments. And science again is grades 4 through 10 because we start testing in science. Perfect.
Tracy, this is Max. I do have a question. You've answered this question for me multiple times, but why does the assessment piece, the accountability for it, fall under Title I? Why would the funds be restricted from Title I?
Right, when all of this really sits within IDEA and special education. So because this regulation sits within ESSA, it falls under Title I. This is a regulation that doesn't sit within IDEA. So that's where it kind of crosses. And I know last year as Title I directors, you all were asking, how can you support this? And of course, it's reaching out to your special education directors. I don't want to call Lisa on the spot, but some of our special education directors are sitting in this meeting too. And so, I mean, I think the only thing I can say is just reach out to them. I don't know if any of you guys, have other thoughts, on where Title I can really help support this. But it really is, it's sitting with IEP team decisions. And we just, we want to support students, and LEAs, and we don't want to be in a space to lose Title I funding. They have yet to take Title I funding from any states. So, and we're super close. We're not that far from it.
Thanks, Tracy. Just a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about potentially losing Title I funds, would it be with regards to the overall allocation to the state, or would it be to individual LEAs?
If you want to scroll back up, Becky, I do believe, Max, I might have to go back and reread and dig deeper. I do believe it sits on the administrative funding, if I remember correctly.
So it'd be the admin set aside at the state.
I think if I remember correctly, I can go back and reread through and dig that. If you go back up to the chart with the consequences, I don't know keep going up, 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 up. It'll be the blue box. It'll be the charts, the blue boxes right there. It doesn't stay within here. I think I'd have to go back and dig into, they have a whole memo on consequences, but I think if I remember correctly, last time you and I looked at it, Max, it was administrative funds, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah. So again, they haven't done that. They haven't taken funds. And I know that other states, I sit on, sort of a national community of practice around all this that, we as, states have been engaging in these conversations. They really try not to. I mean, like they'll move into a space where, they require a technical assistance agency to come in and support states and looking at plans and all those things. And so, I think at the end of the day, if we solidly can feel as a state that we have all the correct kids and we're identifying it and we're over 1%, then I think that's, a different battle that Leah and I take on together. We look at what that looks like. We don't want people to start drawing lines in sands. There's some unintended consequences happening because of this regulation. There are some feeling of being boxed into corners. And I've got, like I said, I'm seeing some of our special ed directors on here too, and that's been brought to our attention where, you know, lines are being drawn and we're ranking kids, and if you're over the 1%, you're out, or you're in, and that's not how we make these decisions. And so, which is partly why we can't like force the 1% on a district, right? We can't say that you can't have over 1%. There just are things that we have to do to ensure we have the right kids.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, you bet.
Additional questions for Tracy?
And so my contact's on there. So is Leah Voorhees. I mean, again, please work with your special education directors. I have not taken this to assessment side yet. So these guys will see this mid-December. In fact, they're all meeting right now, so I could only be in so many places at once. But so I'll take this to them in December. Your Utrex data folks are also aware of some of this. And then, Malia is our data kind of person. So she's giving them a heads up and what their expectations are. So there's a lot of data and projections that your special ed directors are asked to do in that justification. So we're trying to make sure that we have robustly everybody just informed. And then, making sure that our special ed counterparts are supported in the needs that they have to do what needs to happen here. And please feel free to reach out to me at any point for questions or concerns or I am here to support you guys in what you need.
Much appreciated, Tracy. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Max.
Val, do you want me to cross fingers and try to share for Robert?
It's actually Becky now that's sharing.
Oh, Becky. Well, Becky, I'll let you continue to run that ship because I don't want to interrupt and have my computer shut down again. That was a lot of fun. So I'm going to turn the time over to Robert Palmer. He not only is our McKinney-Vento homeless education specialist at the state, but he also is our migrant education specialist at the state. So he does double duty. I started earlier saying that there was a change a couple of years back in Utah grants for your Title I application. Homeless used to be a required set aside. That's the way the system set it up. And when you put money into that, what we found was that if you came to the end of the year and you didn't need to utilize those funds, you couldn't pull them back out of that set aside at some point. We did some further investigation, and actually statutorily, it says that your set aside for homeless students experiencing homelessness is based on a needs assessment. So if you conduct your LEA needs assessment and determine that you do have students experiencing homelessness, or that you think you may have, there's been a history of that happening in the middle of the year, then you would set aside funds to provide services unique to those students. However, even though that is a potentially required set aside, meaning you don't have to set aside funds, there are still LEA responsibilities relevant and provided and required by statute for an LEA to provide for students experiencing homelessness. So Robert was kind enough, I asked him to come in and talk specifically about what those requirements are for an LEA and a identified person to be there ready and willing to provide those services. So Robert, we'll turn the time over to you. And Becky, if you don't mind, I'll let you continue to drive the show, the slides.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces of people I've worked with in previous areas. Thank you, Dr. Lang. What a great meeting so far. Appreciate your presentation as well as Tracy Gooley's. It's been great to hear all the updates. As Dr. Lang has said, my name is Robert Palmer. I am the McKinney-Vento program specialist, and I also do oversee the migrant education program as well. I've been overseeing these two programs for the past 16 months. I've been at USBE for coming on 9 years in January, which has been such a wonderful opportunity. I started out working with Dr. Lang in school improvement and got to learn from him. I then transitioned to the after school world, overseeing some after school grant funding before the funding was eliminated by the legislature. And now I'm honored and privileged to have these programs under my careful watch. Dr. Lang oversaw these programs for many years. And as a result, we have a wonderful, very strong McKinney-Vento program here in Utah. Many of you are at the LEA level have great people who have been established in these roles for many, many years and have great leadership as well. So we're going to go ahead and start talking about the role of the liaison today and what's required. So Becky, if you could just make this screen full, that would be great. Perfect. So the McKinney-Vento Act provides a number of LEA requirements, like Dr. Lang said, for serving homeless children and youth. And there's where it is listed in the code for you. Next slide, please. Under the McKinney-Vento Act, every local education agency, or LEA, must appoint a local homeless education liaison. So that is what the main message is today, is whether you receive McKinney-Vento funding or not, whether you are a charter school, whatever the case is, every LEA must appoint a local homeless education liaison. Next slide, please. I think we need to go back one, please, Becky. So just like I said again, just under the McKinney-Vento Act, every LEA must appoint a local homeless education liaison. Thank you, Becky. Next slide. So McKinney-Vento means individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and children and youth who are sharing the... I am so sorry. I am having a hard time seeing that screen.
Becky, you might want to
make
try
this
just
screen?
the slideshow
Yeah.
button.
I apologize. My glasses are missing in action right now. I have lots of little friends in my family that like to play glasses and borrow my glasses at times, so I apologize for that.
And sorry, folks, let me try to share, Becky. Here's where you were, I believe, Robert.
Perfect. Thank you, Max. I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience,
Thanks,
everyone.
Becky.
All right, so McKinney-Vento means individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and children and youth who are sharing the housing of other persons due to the loss of housing, economic hardships, or a similar reason. Children and youth living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds due to lack of alternative adequate accommodations. Children and youth living in emergency or transitional shelters, cars, parks, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, and public spaces not meant for habitation, such as bus stations or train stations. Next slide, please, Max. Okay, so this McKinney-Vento Act is under federal programs, the ESSA, Title VII, Part B, and the homeless set aside, as Max has explained, it's not 100% a requirement under Title I, but it can be selected as a requirement under Title I if you so choose. Next slide, please. So what must you do as an LEA? So the expectation is to continue a homeless child's or youth education in the school of origin for the duration of homelessness and for the remainder of the academic year, if the child or youth becomes permanently housed during an academic year. Enroll the homeless child or youth in any public school that non-homeless students who live in the attendance area in which the child or youth is actually living are eligible to attend. Next slide, please. Presume that keeping the child or youth in the school of origin is in the child's or youth's best interest, except when doing so is contrary to the request of a child or youth's parents or guardian, or in the case of an unaccompanied homeless youth, the youth themselves. Next slide, please. Consider student-centered factors related to the child's or youth's best interest, including factors related to the impact of mobility on achievement, education, health, and safety of homeless children and youth, giving priority to the request of the child's or youth's parents or guardian, or once again, in the case of an unaccompanied youth, the youth themselves. Next slide, please. Provide a written explanation of the reasons for the LEA's decision, including information regarding the right to appeal to the parent or guardian of a homeless student or to an unaccompanied homeless youth if the LEA sends a child to a school other than the one requested. And next slide, please. Ensure, in the case of an unaccompanied homeless youth, that the local liaison assists in placement or enrollment decisions, gives priority to the views of the youth, and provides notice of the right to appeal an LEA's best interest determination that is contrary to the youth's request. Next slide, please. Okay, so the liaison's role. And we have, like I said earlier, so many wonderful liaisons set up here in Utah that are just wonderful. We actually even had one of our liaisons present at the national conference this past month, which is just a high honor. And we have so many people who work so hard and they're doing a fantastic job. If you do not have a liaison right now, that's okay. I'm happy to come and do the training with them and with you. Also, what we encourage people to do is, if you are in the process of setting this up, to find an LEA closest to your school's location and to work with them to try to see how they're doing things and the unique needs in your geographical area. But back to our presentation, the liaison's role. The local liaison is the key to ensuring homeless children and youth receive the services they need. It is required in all LEA, regardless of subgrant status. The liaison is the primary contact between homeless families, the school, LEA staff, shelter workers, and other service providers. So as you can see, it's a very important role that really is beneficial to these students and their families. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the liaison responsibilities, there's the codes listed as well. The McKinney-Vento Act lists the responsibilities of the local liaison, that they will ensure that homeless children and youth are identified by school personnel through outreach and coordination with other agencies. Homeless children and youth are enrolled in and have a full and equal opportunity to succeed in school. Homeless families, children and youth, have access to and receive educational services for which they are eligible, including Head Start programs, early intervention services under Part C of the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and other preschool programs administered by the LEA. Next slide, please. Homeless families, children, and youth receive referrals to healthcare services, dental services, mental health and substance abuse services, housing services, and other appropriate services. The parents or guardians of homeless children and youth are informed of the educational and related opportunities available to their child and are provided with meaningful opportunities to participate in the education of their children. Next slide, please. Public notice of the educational rights of homeless children and youth is disseminated in locations frequented by parents or guardians of homeless children and youth and unaccompanied youth. These, for example, include schools, shelters, public libraries, soup kitchens, and in a manner and form understandable to parents and guardians and unaccompanied youth. Enrollment disputes are mediated according to the law. Next slide, please. The parents or guardian of a homeless child or youth and any unaccompanied homeless youth is fully informed of all transportation services, including transportation to the school of origin. School personnel who serve homeless children and youth receive professional development and other support. Unaccompanied homeless youth are enrolled in school, have opportunities to meet the same challenging state academic standards established for other students, and are informed of their status as independent students and assisted to receive verification of their status for completing the free application for federal student aid, also referred to as FAFSA. Next slide, please.
Robert, can I stop you there and just ask a clarifying question?
Yes,
Um,
sir.
when you're talking about the school of origin, what is that specifically referring to?
Thank you, Maxwell. Wonderful question, and it's one that comes up frequently. The school of origin is the school where the student began their educational experience or is the one in which they live closest to that they would normally be attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Next slide, please. Okay, this part's really important and something that we all need to just be aware of. We really want to make sure that these students, that their rights and their privacy is respected at all times. So treat information about a homeless child or youth living situation as a student education record and not deem it to be directory information. Use the term McKinney-Vento in any open conversation regarding students in a homeless situation. Disclosing that a student and family are McKinney-Vento is only on a need-to-know basis. Next slide, please. Okay, comparable services. This is something that we need to make sure is also happening for these students. Provide services comparable to those received by other students in the school. Funding for services provided to non-McKinney-Vento students should also provide for those same services for McKinney-Vento students. And this one's key. Be sure to track and have proof of McKinney-Vento and Title I set-aside expenses. Next slide, please. Okay, the coordination provisions, we are hopeful that there will be coordination with local with local social service agencies and other agencies or entities providing services to homeless children and youth and their families, including services and programs funded under the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. Next slide, please. Student identification is so key and so important in the role of the liaison. Their responsibility is to identify possible homeless students and identify them as McKinney-Vento students. Liaisons should be actively seeking McKinney-Vento students throughout the year through various means to identify the most students. Once identified, students should be informed of their rights under the law, and the key part here, services should begin immediately. Next slide, please. Okay, the USBE, or the Utah State Board of Education, has an MOU in place with the Utah Homeless Management Information System. This service is available to all those who wish to use it in their duties as a liaison for their charter school and district. They provide us with a presentation for our viewing that is linked there. Max will be sending this out to everyone after the meeting, and you may go ahead on your own time if it's interesting to you, can view that presentation at the link below. Next slide, please. That is the training for today. As I said earlier, if you have any questions or if you would like me to come to your LEA, I've been out to many LEAs this past 16 months and done this training with their staff and their people or need help setting up a liaison, please contact me. There's my phone number. I am always quick to respond back, hopefully as soon as I hear from you. So thank you again, Dr. Lang, for this wonderful opportunity. And are there any questions now while I'm here?
I'm not sure if there was a question in the chat. I couldn't click on it, but it looked like there was something in the chat.
I'm not seeing a question, but my chat might not be up to date.
What questions do you have for Robert? Robert, I have a quick question, and this is kind of putting you on the spot, but I tend to like to do that to you.
Right.
So if some of this might be new information for some LEAs. Probably
Correct.
most have identified their McKinney-Vento liaison. But
Yes.
for those that this is new information, what strategies have you seen LEAs implement in actually identifying students who come into their school? How do they know this student might need these services and have the rights to these services? How do they know that? What strategies have you seen LEAs implement?
Well, an outstanding question, Max. I love that question. And like I said earlier, and I'll continue to say, the LEAs here in Utah are fantastic. Many of them have their school main secretary as they are meeting the students and grading the students, get to know these students, and are through observation is a big key. Also, at the registration process during the registration cards, they also have that as well, where they can submit that information. And then in dialogue and in collaboration with the students' classroom teachers, I know that many districts have a setup where they are able to have a teacher flag a student that they're concerned about in any regard, whether it's academic, whether it's McKinney-Vento, or whatever the case might be. And then the form goes around, and this is in secondary education, to all the different teachers and staff who interact with that student, and they can express if they have any concerns as well. And then it goes to their student services committee, and they're able to work those things out. The collaboration amongst our McKinney-Vento liaisons in the state is impeccable. Like I said, we just recently had our fall meeting where we had them all together, and it was so fun to listen to them share ideas, share strategies, share instances of where they can collaborate together to meet the needs of these students and their families. So, fantastic question, Max. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Additional questions for Robert?
Thanks, everyone. Great to see everyone. Have a happy holiday season. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Robert, although you signed off, let me just ask a clarifying question. So, McKinney-Vento, Utah actually receives a grant to the state, and it's not very much money. It's how much money does Utah receive as a McKinney-Vento grant to allocate out to LEAs?
It's not a whole lot of money. And the problem is that it's based on the number of McKinney-Vento students. So that's why it's so important that we continually are identifying these students and making sure that we have those students identified so we can continue to receive the funding. I'm not sure exactly what the funding was this year. I'd have to look it up, Max. I don't want to say an incorrect number.
But it's not quite $1 million, correct?
No. Yeah, you're right.
And the number of students I think we reported last year was north of 16,000 in the
That's
state
correct.
who are identified as McKinney-Vento.
And the number's growing. The number's growing, and the number of LEAs. So we completed, we'll have another McKinney-Vento competition, grant competition in the spring. But the number of students is growing, and the number of LEAs reaching out for funding is not growing. And that's where the situation becomes a little bit tricky because we're having to braid funds and use other resources, such as Title I, like we talked about, to be able to meet those needs of those students. There's also lots of the LEAs have lists of resources and centers and places where these students can receive these services for free without any expense to the LEA.
Thank you, Robert. Now we'll accept your sign off. So much appreciated. And just for, again, a sum, it's, there is an actual grant to the state, McKinney-Vento, but there are a few LEAs that actually competitively can apply for those funds because they have identified a substantial number of McKinney students experiencing homelessness or McKinney-Vento students. As such, the law puts into place that specific requirement. Every LEA has identified a McKinney-Vento liaison so that should students come in, they still have the same rights and can have access to the same educational experiences that other students have, regardless of their situation. So, should you have questions about who might or who should be your homeless liaison, if you have not identified one, please reach out to Robert. He's a super nice guy. And this is where we really connect is he knows everything about U of U football. So if you also have questions about that, he is like an encyclopedia. Robert, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lang. My honor and privilege. Appreciate you.
Listen, folks, we've reached the end of this abbreviated Title I directors meeting this fall. Are there questions that you have right now regarding anything that we talked about today? What's happening in DC, Title I in context of all of that, the 1% alternate assessment, or anything regarding McKinney-Vento?
I have a question, not necessarily about the McKinney-Vento, but about the needs assessment. And on the Title I grant site, if we have no homeless students identified, do we need to do a needs assessment or have money in set aside?
That's a fantastic question. I think Karen saying, we have not identified or we've never really identified any student, any McKinney-Vento students. I think that's a part of that needs assessment. You haven't identified them, so you don't have any. It would not be required, therefore, to set aside money in the set aside form for homeless students. But I think just saying, we've actively paid attention. We haven't identified any students. I think you've conducted at least that portion of the needs assessment. Had you
Okay.
identified students, you would continue that needs assessment. Now that we've identified them, what do we need to do? And that would be where your set aside would come in. Great
Well,
question.
yeah, and I'm just curious because in previous years, we've always had money and set aside and said that the following questions in the grant was not applicable. So this year it seems to have changed, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing it right.
Yeah, you're correct, Karen. It has changed. In years past, the way that Utah Grants was set up in the set aside forms, it required you to set aside something for McKinney-Vento students. In the updates to the system and being more in line with statute and those requirements, the statute actually says by requirement that based on a needs assessment, you determine the amount of set aside for McKinney-Vento. So if your needs assessment is, well, we don't have any of those students, we haven't traditionally had those students, we don't expect any of those students this fiscal year, then you wouldn't need to set aside. So that's where Utah Grants changed. It doesn't require you to put a number in there where previously it did. Great questions. Additional questions? Okay, going once, going twice, sold. Folks, I just want to thank you, and I want you to know how much I appreciate your patience in this sometimes wild ride of virtual meetings. That was a fun time for me to have my computer just shut down and tell me that it needed to restart mid-sentence. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Robert, for pitching in and keeping the show going. Unfortunately, I can't get my camera to work, and I even got up and put a tie on this morning. So, shoot. Folks, please have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And as we move into the holidays, I hope you have time off. During this busy time, we here at USBE on our ERSI team, we're available. Please reach out to us with questions. We're more than happy to answer them. If we don't immediately get back to you, please ask again. We will get there. Much appreciated. We'll see you at the next one, and signing off. We will hang around here for office hours. So if you have LEA specific questions or questions specific to your world that you would like to talk about or address, please hang out and ask us, and we will do our best to answer those, or we will note them and go research the answer for you. Folks, thank you. Much appreciated. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you down the road.